Okay, let's get this thing to work. Probably the first thing I've done, I've deleted all the buttons except for one. We're only going to need one. And I've created two scripts. The first one is I've just called button list button, so it's going to be the script that sits on the button itself. And I've created a button list control, and that's going to sit on the, what's that going to sit on? Just the scroll list itself. And I've got them down in Visual Studio here, which I've opened up. There's nothing in them yet. We're about to write them now. So we'll do that. I'll start with the button list button. I'll get rid of the start and update. We don't need them just yet. And I'm going to write two public. Yes, I think so. We'll see. Two public functions. Public void. We'll call the first one set text. And I'm going to write another one. Public void on click. There we go. Cool. Just save that. So for set text, what we want to do is when this button is created, we're going to send this command to it or run this function to basically set its name. So to give its text, the text on the button, something to display. So for that function, we're going to add a string, and we'll call the string text string. Simple enough. Cool. Nice and easy. So we're going to need a variable. We'll make it a serialized field private. Actually, before we do that, we need to do something. We'll go up the top here and we'll say using UnityEngine.ui because we're going to need to access some UI functions. Private text, and we'll call it my text. So when set text is run, all we want to do is say my text.getComponent text. Text. No, we don't even need get component because it is a text component. What am I doing? No, my text.text. That easy. Equals text string. Where is it? There. So when this function is run, all it's going to do is find the text that's attached to the button, which we're going to set here, and it's going to set it to be the string that we pass to the function. The on click, we'll add that in a second just so it'll do something. Cool. Alright, let's go to the button list control now. We'll go to the other script. This is the one that's going to be sitting on the list itself. I'll get rid of these because I don't know if we need them just yet. We will in a bit, but whatever. And what we're going to do, we'll set another set another serialized field private game object button template, we'll call it. This is going to be the in quotation marks prefab for the button that we're going to spawn. What do we want to do? Okay, so we actually want to create some buttons. So what we'll do, we'll write a function to actually do that. So we'll say void generate gen buttons. Let's call it that. That works. Okay, so when this is run, what do we want to do? Well, first of all, we want to create a bunch of buttons when we want to base it on some sort of content, I suppose. So we might create a list. I think is going to be a good thing to do here. We'll just create a private. Should we do a list? Yeah, we'll do a list. What will we do a list of? We'll do a list of. Let's do a list of ints. We'll just call it int list. Oh, excuse me. Working this out as I go here. And we will actually need a start function, so let's add that back in. And when it starts, let's say for, I don't know, I'm just doing something here to int I equals 1, I is less than or equal to, how many buttons do we want? 20. I plus plus, whoops. God, get the right key. So all I'm doing is running a loop, ideally 20 times. And that's going to create, it's just going to fill a list that we can use. Suppose I could just do this on the start actually. Doesn't matter. Actually I could. I don't need the list. Let's ignore the list. I'm wondering if we even need to do gen buttons. Let's not even do that. I don't even need to do that right now. Sorry. Okay. So in that loop, what are we going to do? Alright, every time the loop runs, let's generate a new button, and let's name it something like button number and then I. So we'll call it button number. It'll be button number 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 20, and it should lay itself out in the list nicely. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to say game object button. So we're creating a new game object that we're just going to call button. It's just a temporary one. Instantiate, and we're just going to say button. What was it? Button template. That's all we need as game object, as type game object. Okay, we're going to need to set it to active. So, oops, what am I doing? Button.setActive is going to equal true. We want the button to be active because we're now going to access the button script that's attached to it. So we're going to say button.getComponent, and that component is going to be the button list button script that's attached to it, and we're going to set name. No, what did I say? What did I call it? I can't remember what I called it. Set text, that's it. Dot set. Oops, need brackets, that's why. Set text, there it is. And the text is going to be a string, and it will be button number plus I. So it should read button number and then whatever I is when this part of the loop is running. Now this part is also quite important, so pay attention. We want to say button.transform.setParent. So we are now setting the parent of the object. We're going to set it to be the button template transform.parent. So, oops, no, parent. Let's try that again. There we go. Now this is important because we want the button to child itself, or to set its parent to be the content object, which is what the button template's parent object is. So we're basically saying, okay, the new button, set its parent to be the same as the template that we're spawning from. And the other really important part here is to add in a second parameter of the world position stays, which you can sort of see there. If it's true, which I believe it is by default, so if true, the position of the button will adjust itself in world space, which you don't want for the GUI, because it's going to end up, these things are going to position themselves in weird spots and you won't be able to see them, and it will drive you crazy. So we are just adding a false. Alright, we do actually need a list, because this is all well and good. Actually, no, we don't. Not unless we're generating lists. Sorry, I'm getting confused. I apologize. But that's very straightforward, I believe. I'm just going over that to make sure. So when we start, it's just going to go through a loop 20 times. It's going to spawn a new button. It's going to set the button to active, and then all it's going to do is tell the button to set its text to be the string that we've created here, which will be button number 1 to 20, ideally. Once it's done all that, it's going to set the parent of the new button that we just created to be the content object, or the parent of the button template. I hope that makes sense. So that really is all there is to it. How you spawn the buttons doesn't matter. We'll do it off a list in just a second. I think it's worth covering that. But as you can see, we're just using a for loop, and in each for loop all we're doing is creating a new button, setting it to active, setting the text, and then parenting it so that it will create the new button in the list. So that should hopefully work already. We just need to drag and drop a couple of things, but we'll do that in a second. I'm just checking. The onClick function will call from the button itself, but we don't need to worry about that just yet. Cool. Okay, I'm going to drag and drop these scripts. We'll just go back into Unity. You can see here we've still got the menu. Everything is good and everything is happy. We're going to go to the button list button. We're just going to drag that onto our button here in the scene. If we now click on that, we can see it's here. So my text, we're just going to set to be the child text object of the button. There we go. That's the text you can see there. It just says button. I'll just apply that. Actually, I'll apply the whole thing because I broke the prefab. Cool. So we've got the button there. And we also want to get the list control, and we're just going to drag that onto the scroll list object, so the very parent scroll list object. And for button template, we're just going to drag and drop that button into it. apply, actually go to the button and disable it. There we go. So you can't see anything in the menu now. Ideally when we run this, as long as I haven't stuffed anything up, we should hopefully have a list full of 20 buttons. Let's have a quick look. Here we go. There we go. We scroll down. What do we get up to? Button 20. And you can see that scroll list is, once again, maintaining or sort of keeping itself within the mask. But you can also see that it stops, like it's not going down past that mask. And when you actually scroll it, the default position of the buttons will line up with the viewport, ideally. And there you go. So that's filling the list. That's one way to do it, at least. We'll just quickly go back and we'll go to the button list button, and on click, which will be the function we call when we actually click the button. What have we done? So we've got the text here. I might do something else. Let's add a private string, which will say my text string. And when we run the set text, I'm just going to say my text string is also equal to that text string that we've passed in the function parameters. And what we're going to do is on click, so basically the idea is that we're storing that so that when we actually click the button I can use it. So on click, we could just do it from here. I could say debug.log, what is it, my text string, which is all I'm thinking of doing. So when you click the button, all it's going to do is print the button name to the debug console. We could do it from here, but what you're probably going to want to do if you're using this in any other capacity, so if it wasn't this simple and straightforward, if you're actually building something good, what we're probably going to want to do here is, instead of running this function from the button, we want to pass it back to the control. So we're going to need something for this. We'll say serialize field private, what is it called, button list control. So we're creating a not a button list, button control. We're creating a button list control variable, which we'll just call button control, I guess. Probably want a better name if you've got multiple menus, but whatever. So we'll set that, we'll drag and drop that in the editor, and when we run the on click, instead what we might do, just go back to the button list control. We're going to add a new function. We'll make it a public function. Public void, we'll just say button clicked. Sounds good. And I'm going to put that in there, and I'm going to say string my text string just as a parameter, just to keep that happy. Cool, so that's just a real quick little function. All that's going to do is print the name of the button, and if we go back to the button script, so when it's actually clicked, what do we want to do? We want to go to the button control that we've defined. We want to do a get component on it, button list. No, we don't. What am I doing? Why do I keep doing this? Button control, and then what was it? It was button clicked, and we're just going to pass it the my text string, so that when we click this button, it's just going to pass the details it has back to the control, and the control is actually going to perform the work. The control is going to do the debug log. Obviously it doesn't need to pass it back to the control in this context, but ideally you would have something a bit more complicated in there. You wouldn't just be printing the name of the button, and it's easier to have a single controlling object handling that stuff than it is the buttons, I think. Cool. Okay, we'll need to drag and drop some stuff. I'll do that now before I forget. So I think I set that on the button. If we just go to the button itself, just click there. There we go. So it's now got the button scroll list object. Did I create anything else? No, I didn't. Good. Always worth checking. Alright, cool. So having the list is fun. That's entertaining. Let's see if we can do it in a bit more of an interesting way. Let's create a new list. It doesn't need to be accessible, so we'll say private list. This list is going to contain game objects. We're going to call it buttons. So this is going to be a list of all buttons that we create. Actually, no. Once again, I don't think we'll do it that way. I'm going to create an array. sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I can't type. Serialize private. Just make it. We'll do ints again. Int array. And we're going to populate that in the editor. And we'll just say for, instead of that we'll do a for each int, which we'll call I, in int array, spawn the buttons. Same sort of thing. So, but instead you might be passing it, say, a list of, I don't know, certain settings, or you might be passing it a list of game objects, or an array of game objects, or whatever. The idea is you can sort of see how when this start function is run, or this could be anything. It could be a, generate list, which you could call from something else, like say another button, so that each time this list is run, it'll generate this. And this is where I was sort of getting ahead of myself a little bit. I'm going to show you that list that I keep trying to create. Private list, and this is going to be a list of game objects, and we'll say buttons. And the point of this is, so let's imagine that you want to generate the list multiple times. Let's say it's a menu that pops out. You click a button and the whole menu appears. So each time the menu appears, you obviously want to run the generate list function to create a new bunch of buttons based upon whatever values you're giving it. So if it's if it's a list of items in a player inventory, that's likely going to change quite frequently. So every time you want to show the inventory menu or whatever, you need to run the generate list function. Now that's all well and good, but then you also need to be able to just destroy these objects. So because every time this function's run, it generates the buttons and it spawns them into the world, you need to keep track of that. Otherwise you're going to end up with a list that constantly adds on to itself. So it'll run once and it'll spawn buttons 1 to 20, and then you run it again, it'll spawn another set of buttons from 1 to 20. So if you're not deleting them every time, you're going to have a bit of fun. So best thing to do is just say if buttons.count is greater than 0. So if we actually have some items in this buttons list, then we're just going to say for each game object button. I think we can do that. Have I used that elsewhere? No. In buttons. What are we doing? We are destroying button.gameObject. And then once it's done that, once it's run through the whole list, we're just going to say buttons.clear to clear the whole list out. So it's basically going to destroy all the previous buttons, then clear the list, and then it's going to spawn everything again. So like I said, it's important to do that, because if you're spawning that menu multiple times in your game, which if it's a scrolling menu I'm imagining you will do, it's important to keep track of which buttons you've actually spawned already and destroy them before creating the new ones. Otherwise, like I said, you can have a menu that's constantly adding itself onto itself, and it'll just get bigger and bigger and bigger. But that should work. We actually need to call the generate list function. I don't know, I won't sort of cover that too much. Like, you'll have your own methods. You can set the list to be, you can set the whole scroll list object to be false, to be inactive if you wanted, or you can just move it off screen, or you can destroy the whole thing and recreate the whole thing. How you handle that list, or how you handle the menus, up to you. What's important is, you can see here how to run. You can run this function from wherever, and you can do a whole bunch of other stuff in here. You could say that the transform.position is sort of equal to somewhere off screen, and it could update itself every time the list is run, or I don't know, whatever. What's important is you run the function and the list will create itself. We saw it sort of happening before. I'm just wondering if I can still, I'll change that to start just so you can see it happening. It'll probably just be exactly the same though. Except we would need to populate that array, which is probably actually going to take a while. Let's just set it to 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There we go. Apply, and I'll just run it. And it didn't work. Not sure why. I've done something wrong. Oops, object reference. Buttons. Of course, because when you're working with a list, you need to actually make sure it's correctly initialized. So we'll say buttons equals new list of game objects. That should fix that. Just give it a second, sort itself out. A bit of luck if I run this, it should work now. Probably going to prove me wrong though, because it likes to do that. Always likes to throw me one little error. There you go. Buttons 1 to 10. So I hope that all makes sense. Like I said, it's sort of the layout's the fiddly part, the scripting not so much. It's quite straightforward, I think. And it's just good to have this control object. You know, this is what you throw the data at to tell it sort of how to treat the list. And the buttons themselves should really have minimal interaction. I think you should just ultimately just be passing it little things and telling it to send it back to the controlling object, and that will handle most of the big heavy work. But up to you, really. It's just whatever you're comfortable with. There you go. That's generating a list of buttons at runtime. Once again, it's only a vertical list. Really doing other lists isn't too much different. You just probably be using a grid layout instead, or a horizontal layout. It's all pretty similar, but we'll cover a couple others anyway, and I can show you a couple of different things, so just ways you can achieve different little effects. So stick around, and hopefully I'll have those videos up shortly. Thanks guys.